We begin with a Fox News alert on the major gains for ISIS, the savages in the Middle East. We're told a key Syrian town is now on the verge of falling to those terrorists. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here with me today, Sandra Smith, Andrea Tenteros, Ainsley Earhart, today's #OneLuckyGuy, editor-in-chief at RedState.com and Fox News contributor Eric Erickson, and he is Outnumbered. We're glad to have you.
Thanks very much for having me.
Great to have you.
We got a lot going on. Well, we're going to jump in.
Okay.
We'll get to know you all along for an hour. It's going to be great. Well, an official in the town of Kobani, which is near the Turkish border, is telling Fox News the headquarters of the Kurdish forces in the center of the town has now fallen to ISIS. Kobani's defenders are saying the United States is only giving token support with its intensified airstrikes from above. A local Kurdish official says ISIS fighters are shelling Kobani's single border crossing with Turkey right now. Let's bring in Greg Palcott. And he's actually not too far from the action right now. And in the last hour, I know we saw more smoke rising up from that town. Greg?
Yeah, Harris, those stepped-up U.S. airstrikes might be slowing the ISIS terrorists down. We heard that, but we also saw that they are definitely on the march. Just about for the entire day, we were listening to a real battle royal coming from that government section of the town that is in the center of the town. Our sources do confirm that ISIS has taken the headquarters of the Kurdish defenders, but we still heard a lot of fighting, so that thing is not going down easily. And also, we were told that ISIS basically controls the one border crossing between Kobani and Turkey. That is important because that is the only way civilians and casualties can get out of Kobani into Turkey, and it's the only way the reinforcements and resupplies can get in. So very bad for the Kurds. By the best estimation we had, the terrorists now hold about 1/3 of the town, despite those jacked up U.S. airstrikes. By our count from the CENTCOM releases, in the past 5 days, there have been 32 U.S. airstrikes in and around Kobani against ISIS targets. In the entire week before, there were only 5. Of course, people on the ground think or worry that it's just too late. As for Turkey, yeah, right next to our live positions, we were watching the Turkish tanks absolutely doing nothing. Turkey still resolutely does not seem to want to get involved. It has problems with the ethnic Kurds. They can be rebellious at times, and it has problems with the U.S. approach to the ISIS terror group. And finally, Harris, General John Allen, who heads up the U.S. anti-ISIS campaign, was in Ankara today, yes, and yesterday as well, speaking with Turkish officials. The outcome of that meeting, let me make sure I get the quote right for you, to deepen bilateral consultations between the two countries. That is not much consolation for, according to the UN, something like 700 civilians who are still caught inside Kobani, most of them elderly. Back to you.
Greg Palcott, thank you very much for teeing this up for us. I want to go straight to you, Eric. If we thought that no one could see it, this bold-face evidence now, I feel, of an in-house tug-of-war between the military experts and the civilian White House that we have.
Right. There seems to be such a hesitation from the Obama administration, which campaigned on no more wars and bring the troops home, and now it looks like we need to bring the troops. You know, the terrible irony about Kobani is that it was founded in the early 1900s by Armenians escaping genocide, and now they've mostly gone. The Kurds have moved in, and now it looks like they're going to be exposed to a genocide in Kobani because we were too little too late. If we bomb now, we've got to bomb the town.
Well, yeah. I mean, from what I understand, and Greg's reporting too earlier today, they have 3 sides of the town surrounded. Right. What they're trying to do is get, completely encircle it and then move in toward the center, and you have all those people in the middle. You know, Andrea, I want to talk to you about the politics of this, because it's not just about what's happening for us politically here inside the United States. The Turkish foreign minister is saying, look, the United States waited so long. We're not going to commit our forces until we get a real in-writing coalition. I'm paraphrasing him a bit here, because it took the Americans so long to commit anything. We don't want to go in on the ground by ourselves.
Oh, I think that's an excuse. I mean, this really is a priority for Turkey, and it's a priority for Bashar Assad. This is a city in his country. So this is up to the Syrian army. I don't think this should be American boots on the ground fighting this. And look, the Kurds are very distrustful of us. Harris, you remember last year when we were drawing red lines with Syria? We actually were making promises with the Kurds. We were making promises to the Free Syrian army, not Bashar Assad's army, that we would arm them, that we would help them, and guess what? We never did. So if you're the Kurds, you have very little faith in the United States. They are the people that we should be arming, if anything, since we've said no boots on the ground. But the Turks, we can't rely on them. They have their tanks right at the border to protect their country. And frankly, it's a shame if this town falls. It's an absolute shame.
Right.
But I don't think our men and women should be there on the ground trying to protect it.
But this goes against most suggestions of most U.S. military generals that, bottom line, say at minimum we need boots on the ground just to assess the damage and the effectiveness of the current U.S. airstrikes that we're ramping up right now. I talked to Lieutenant General James Dubik this morning on Fox Business. He oversaw training of Iraqi forces during the Bush administration. He specifically said that we need a proper air-ground operation going. He said because until then, we can ramp up airstrikes all you want, but ISIS will adapt and they will maneuver around these airstrikes. And until then, we need to put American boots on the ground.
What's the point of these airstrikes if they're not working? If we're there to fight ISIS and try to prevent ISIS from doing what they're doing, obviously the airstrikes are not working. We need to change our plan, because to me it looks like the airstrikes are just for show at this point. If they're not working.
Real quickly before we move on, because we saw the Dow have so much volatility. And Sandra, I mentioned this to you in the last couple of days, and I'm looking at the Associated Press wires, the Reuters wires, and they're quoting things like, well, it's the global economy and worries about that. Can you just speak about that? Because it was in free fall yesterday.
Well, we saw over a 300-point loss in the Dow Jones Industrial Average yesterday, and of course a lot of speculation went to that all of the sudden, finally, these geopolitical crises are weighing on U.S. stock markets. We've seen record high after record high. It's becoming a reality for many Americans what a threat ISIS is to the West, and those concerns certainly do play out in the mind of investors. Meantime, the White House standing by its investigation into the Secret Service prostitution scandal from 2 years ago in Colombia. This after reports it failed to fully investigate whether a volunteer on the president's advance team had a call girl stay overnight in his hotel room. The White House insisting there was no wrongdoing, but Republicans like Senator Lindsey Graham not buying it. He wants the White House to hand over all of its records on the matter, saying in a letter to the administration, quote, I am troubled by the new details that have come to light in the investigation following the incident. Nearly 24 Secret Service agents and members of the military were disciplined or fired. However, I'm concerned that the administration did not properly investigate or discipline its own staff. Harris, he's simply just saying, turn over the records, all the details of the investigation. Why not?
Well, and I'm curious to know what actually would be worse than what we already know in this case. I mean, what could be more damaging? Why not turn over those records at this point? I mean, we know that somebody who was tasked to protect this president, dozens of them, in fact, these agents, had hookers in their rooms at a hotel just before the president was set to arrive. And we know that somebody who was volunteering, a young man who was volunteering, who now works for the administration on global women's issues, which is, I think, the point that Andrea made yesterday.
Wow. I think Andrea said, yeah,
was
can't
along
make
the
this
way.
up. Wow.
And while it has not yet been proven whether he had a hooker in his room, he's part of this report that they tried to suppress until after the election. And we know that because of, and he hasn't officially been called on this whistleblower, this David Nyland, but he's talking.
Eric, would this be totally different if this was a Republican administration?
Yes, it would. Look, you've got the IRS can't find emails, the EPA can't find text messages, the White House can't find a hooker in a hotel room. It's crazy. If this was the Bush administration, many members of the mainstream media would be going overboard about a cover-up. You have multiple people telling the Washington Post they were put on administrative leave for merely raising the question, and now you've got David Nyland saying he had pressure from above to take part out of a report. This would be a huge story if it were a Republican president.
Yeah.
Here's the go ahead.
I was just going to say there's three huge angles to this, I think. There's the cover-up, and Judge Napolitano has said, look, the government can lie to the American people, but the government can't lie to the government. So if during that investigation, Harris, you asked what really matters, if there was lying to that investigator, that's a huge problem. Two, they were, as Eric points out, trying to suppress this till after the midterm elections. Three, they gave special treatment to a donor's son who wrote a big check, again, favoring two Americas, right? The ones who are connected to the White House and the one who isn't. And the one that really irks me the most is this is a White House that claims that there is a Republican war on women. And now I think we see exactly how they feel about women, elevating this kid, this intern, who, by the way, why would an intern be traveling with the president anyway and given such a plum position?
They have some volunteers that do it. But
yeah, right. And we have Jen Psaki as a spokeswoman. They trust kids to do things in this White House. You know, it's like Romper Room or Jungle Gym.
Also also have a hooker in his room. That
Here's
was
the thing.
And how many more times has he had it done? And now he's advising on women's issues.
He denies it.
Here's the
Please, he
thing,
should
too.
lose his job.
What people do in their personal business, honestly, I don't have time to worry about that. But these guys were there to protect the President of the United States. That's the issue. When they're doing all of this, when they're getting drunk, one agent got in trouble back in March for drinking at the Dutch Hotel the day before the President showed up. Last year, you had 2 officers taken off of the President's detail after alleged incidents of sexually related misconduct. Then you had the fence jumper at the White House, this prostitution scandal. We're starting to lose trust and faith in the Secret Service, and that's what's scary, because this is the leader of the free world.
What I think one of the other interesting aspects of this is they're starting to leak now. For 6 years, a lot of people have just put a veil around the White House, and now suddenly we're getting these leaks. Is it a coincidence it's after some Secret Service agents were dismissed that these leaks are coming from the Secret Service?
Well, yeah, think about their morale. We talked about this yesterday. Some Secret Service agents get fired, and a big donor's kid gets promoted. Wouldn't that affect morale, special treatment?
And then, of course, there's the big question about Catherine Brumler, who led the investigation, who's considered the top contender to
And was
replace
told
Eric
twice.
Holder.
Was told twice about this kid.
Things getting interesting. Well, he said, what? The CEO of Microsoft telling a gathering of working women, don't ask for a raise, just trust the system, and karma will reward you down the line. The fierce reaction to those remarks. Plus, football season is in full swing, and now we are learning the domestic violence scandals rocking the NFL could be just the tip of the iceberg, the explosive new allegations from a former team executive.